How is property handled in a will? Now, this is a very important question because a lot of people will say, I don't know if my will covers the house, or maybe it's mentioned in the house. How does that work? Well, the most basic answer is if your property, and whatever the property type it is worth usually over 100,000. It's kind of the rule of thumb, although give or take depending on the situation, but let's just use that rule of thumb. Most properties are. Then you will consider putting together what's considered a trust to actually transfer and protect that property if something happens to you or you become incapacitated. The idea being that the will is not necessarily the best mechanism to actually manage the property while you're living or passed away, because it doesn't actually do that for you. That's what a trust does. That's a big difference between a trust and a will. Can you mention the property in your will? Absolutely, you can. But it doesn't actually do everything that you would want it to do. For example, leaving it to a certain family member, ensuring that there isn't any dispute over it. Maybe that's the best way to explain it. So this sort of thing comes up a lot, and property is handled appropriately in a trust, assuming it's of a certain amount, and most property is, but not all of it. Sometimes if it's less, we might consider doing it another way, but it's usually handled by explaining in the document itself, which we put together for you, what you want to happen with the property. Clients will have different types of wishes with this. Some people say, I want to keep it in the family. I want it to be my grandchildren's. Other people will say, well, I want to leave it up to my children. They can decide what happens to it when I'm no longer here. Some people will even say, I want to keep this and make sure that it never gets sold until they absolutely have to. Or if it gets sold, it should be during the first year after I pass. Something to that effect. So you can really customize a trust and an estate plan. That is the best thing about it. You can really put as much as you want or as little as you want, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, in the actual estate plan. So that is really how property is handled in the most surface level information I can give you. Now, keep in mind that everything is circumstantial. So perhaps if your circumstances are different than others, we may consider doing it in a trust, as opposed to perhaps some people put it in an LLC sometimes, which is the different than estate planning. It's actually business corporation. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are different types of advice that we give clients depending on the type of property and what their goals are.